I'm very happy to have with me today Michelle Senecal de Fonseca. She's the Director of Telecoms, Information and Media at the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. Tell us, what is the bank, first of all? What is the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development?
Sure. The bank was developed in 1991 in a response to the fall of the Berlin Wall and communism. So 60 different governments came together under treaty to build this business. And the whole remit of the bank is to try to promote market economies in these former centrally planned economies.
And who owns the bank?
Bank is owned by 60 different governments. A largest shareholder happens to be the United States at 10%, but the members of the countries that we actually operate in are also members. So the CIS members participate as well.
And how do you work? Do you sponsor or invest in projects, or do you invest in countries? What is it?
We're a commercial bank, so we do invest in project work. We do expect a commercial return, but in actuality, the fundamental remit is to find transition. So we're looking for projects that are going to provide more competition, changing institutions with the state entity, providing new products and services, corporate governance. This is what we consider as transition for the region.
And are you particularly interested in ICTs? Do they give you much more benefit in developmental terms than other sectors?
Well, ICT is a very important element, particularly for this region, when you have such a high level of education and when it comes to the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics skills. In some respects, some of the countries have much better educational pools than Western Europe. And so in being able to provide the infrastructure, the business opportunities, and the investment to allow that to be a competitive part is a very key element of the overall bank.
And what are some of the issues that you're coming up against with the CIS countries?
I think still is one of regulation in many of the countries. This last year we put together, the first time ever, a huge comparative analysis of all of the countries that we operate in on their regulatory reform. And unfortunately, those countries in the CIS tend to still be very much at the low and medium level, which doesn't allow an attractive environment for foreign direct investment. But moreover, it's also creating quite difficulties for its own domestically generated businesses. As an example, I had a roundtable in Russia not so long ago with ISPs and software developers, and they are starting to realize the whole issue of intellectual property rights is becoming a critical one for them. Now, it'd be one thing for Western investors to come in and say that's something you need to look at, but it becomes more resonant with the government when your own industry is telling you this is what they need, is more protection, more assistance, and more regulation.
On the issue of copyright, many of the websites that will give people the opportunity to download or illegally file share may be hosted in countries that don't have the regulatory setup in order to prevent those sites from existing. Is there any sort of trade-off that you are involved in saying that if we invest in your country, you also have to close down sites that might be involved in infringing copyright?
It becomes part of the due diligence process of any country would either loan or invest in, is to understand their business practices and then try to bring them up to what we consider best practices around the world. And so yes, those do become issues to look at.
And how important is it for you to wave the flag for a free market? Is that an essential element for any country or project that you're investing in?
Well, that is one of the fundamental tenets of the treaty that the bank was put together, is to try to promote democracy and free market economy. I think we spend more time on the free market economy because democracy can have many different levels to it.
Well, yes, on the issue of democracy, do you sense a resistance from CIS countries that some of the technologies that are being rolled out are also technologies that allow for a certain level of participatory democracy that they may not be used to? Have you found that this is a problem here?
It is a problem in some respects. We've done a lot of investments not only in the internet but also in the media space. So publications, we're actually finding in some of our countries that the freedom of speech is starting to creep back up again in terms of being an issue. Shutdown of journalists, having free and independent reporting is becoming a problem. And as it becomes more and more digital, it is going to be harder for the countries to be able to manage it. So they're stepping into the data center areas and working with the ISPs, it does create problems.
But from what you've heard here at Connect CIS, are you a little more optimistic about the future for ICTs and for the involvement of people on the ground in participation in governmental decisions about themselves?
I've always been optimistic about this region. I used to be in the telecommunications industry before joining the bank, and I've worked in here for 25 years. And I think the potential for this region is fantastic. I think the commitments that were given by the leaders yesterday, as well as many of the ministers, is an excellent start. And I think they themselves are starting to recognize that their own populations demand this. This is an economic necessity, and it's an engine of growth. And I think more and more of their support will become forthcoming.